If you have your Bibles, turn to 2 Timothy chapter 1. 2 Timothy chapter 1. One of the greatest tactics of the enemy in all of our lives is to assure us that we're doing okay. He does that a myriad of ways. One of those things he does is he tells us to compare ourselves to each other, right? How many of you ever looked at somebody else and been like, man, I'm doing pretty good? Come on. Those of you that didn't raise your hand are lying. Listen, we all do it, right? And maybe you've looked at your other people and been like, man, I'm not doing so good, right? Comparison is a thief of joy. That's what comparison is. Some other ways that the enemy uses its tactics is to keep us complacent. Just, I'm doing good, I'm okay. I don't need to move forward any further. I'm not going backwards, I'm doing okay. Keeps us in complacency. Not continuing to pursue after the Lord. It's another tactic that the enemy uses. It's complacency. Comparison, complacency. They're not all C's, I promise. So another way that the enemy uses a tactic to just make sure that we are not pushing forward and not pursuing after Christ is to keep our minds focused and fixated on all the troubles we face, right? How many of you struggle, you don't have to raise your hands, how many of you struggle with constantly focusing on the negative? Yeah, I think we're all there at some point, aren't we? We do these things and the enemy's like, I got them right where I want them. And so today, as we continue walking through this series of our mission statement, leading our neighbors to know and be changed by Jesus, we're going to look for this week and next week, we're going to look at the word leading. What does it mean to lead and how do we do it? Yeah, what does that have to do with the enemy? Because I think the thing that keeps us from leading our neighbors to know and be changed by Jesus is that the enemy assures us that we're doing okay. And so that we never get to this point where we lead our neighbors to know and be changed by Jesus because I'm doing okay, right? I'm doing okay. You're not doing okay. None of us are. Every single day, we are making a step towards Jesus or we're floating further away from him. We're not staying okay. None of us are. You got that? Apparently none of you got that. Listen, Today, the goal is for us to take a step towards Jesus, take a step towards pursuit, take a step towards leading our neighbors to know and be changed by Jesus. And so in 2 Timothy, Paul is going to encourage this young pastor, this young guy, and by mean young, there's some scholars that say that Timothy possibly could have been 14 years old. I don't know about you, but at 14, I did not need to be pastoring a church. Just throwing that out there. Maybe you're different than me, but I did not need to be pastoring a church at age 14. Other scholars say he was 20. Whatever, he was young in the ministry. We know that. We know that Timothy, by other things, was a little bit shy and timid. We know that he was a little bit weak. And all of these characteristics of this young pastor, Paul kind of points out, but says, hey, take encouragement because God doesn't do this in you. He does this through Christ in you. And so we're going to look at this letter, this short few verses in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verses 3 through 7. And I want us to see some things that are going to help us lead our neighbors to know and be changed by Jesus. So watch this. He says in verse 3, I thank God whom I serve, as did my ancestors, with a clear conscience, as I remember you constantly in my prayers, night and day. As I remember your tears, I long to see you, that I may be filled with joy. Right off the bat in verses 3 and 4, Paul says to Timothy, this young pastor, hey, I remember you, I'm praying for you. I remember the tears that you had, and I long to come see you. But the crux of this is not found in those pleasantries and those things that Paul is telling Timothy. The crux of this is found in verse 3. I thank God whom I serve. Here's the deal. When it comes to us leading our neighbors, I think one of the best practices for all of us is to do this as our first point. Be thankful for the gospel. Every single day, we have to get up and be thankful for the gospel. How many of us on a regular basis get up and thank God, man, God, I'm so thankful for the good news of Jesus, that he came to this earth, he lived a perfect life, he died on a cross, he went in a tomb, and 3 days later, he rose again, beating death. And I am so thankful for that. We don't do that, do we? If we're honest, we don't get up and say those words. We'll say, thank you, God. But listen, here's the deal. We have to be thankful for the gospel, because until we ourselves practice thankfulness for the gospel, it will not then urge us to go and share the gospel. You hear me? Listen, I want you to know some things that happen when we practice thankfulness. This is pretty remarkable, okay? This is what happens in our brains scientifically, okay? This is what happens in our brains when we practice thankfulness. Number one is our attention shifts towards the positive. How many of us are in a habit of negative thinking? Yeah. Our culture gives way to that, doesn't it? To focus on the negative. To focus on the negative. You met the Thiessens last week. They came from England, and we were having lunch one day, and I asked him, they do this little pamphlet that they call the Good News pamphlet, and they hand it out on the streets of their church. And he said we were giving it out, and there was a family who was Muslims, and they just could not wait to get it. And they said, wait, why are you taking this? Oh, we love good news. Because it just says Good News pamphlet. I was like, yeah, everybody loves good news, but what do we typically see on TV? The negative news, right? So when we practice thankfulness, what happens is our attention shifts towards the positive. But listen to this, watch. Your brain's reticular activating system, the filter in which you pay attention, starts prioritizing positive experiences over negative ones. Just by practicing thankfulness, your brain rewires its attention point to go, oh, this is the good, this is the positive. Right? Like, think about that. Well, listen, second thing it does is it rewards our reward pathways are activated. And not in a superficial way like addiction does and those things. But listen, what happens is gratitude lights up the brain's mesolimbic dopamine system. It's the same system involved in motivation and pleasure. But it creates a true, genuine, real good feeling when we practice thankfulness. Isn't that incredible? This is what the brain does when we practice being thankful. 3, it's the stress and negative emotion that we experience decreases significantly. How many of you would love for your stress to decrease? I'm just going to wait because I don't know that anybody in here wouldn't want their, right? We all want our stress to decrease. Listen, this is crazy. Gratitude and thankfulness calm the brain's alarm center. It's the amygdala. It calms that part of the brain. It's almost like God created us and then said, hey, do these things and watch what happens. Right? Number 4, this happens. Social bonding circuits strengthen. That thankfulness activates the brain's oxytocin system, the same one that fosters trust, connection, and empathy. That when you practice thankfulness, guess what happens to your relationships? They strengthen. Guess what happens to your empathy level? It goes up. Because now all of a sudden you're seeing others instead of just seeing what? Yourself. And then the 5th thing that happens when we begin to practice thankfulness is that our identity and meaning deepen. It nudges the default mode network, the system tied to our self-reflection, toward a more humble, connected sense of self. All these things happen in our brain when we practice thankfulness. And so it's no surprise to me as Paul writes to Timothy, this young pastor, and says, I thank God whom I serve, as did my ancestors. Well, what's the point? He's saying, hey, we've got to practice being thankful just like those that came before us did. You know why they practiced thankfulness? Because it pointed their minds to God. It strengthened all the relationships. It did all of these things in the brain when they practiced thankfulness. And listen, you and I have got to practice being thankful for the gospel. It is not something that you will get up and naturally do. It is with intention that we are thankful for the gospel. Literally, it will rewire your brain. You want to lead your neighbors to know and be changed by Jesus? Start by being thankful for the gospel. Every moment of every day, God, I am so thankful for the good news of Jesus. I'm thankful for the cross of Jesus. I'm thankful for the resurrection of Jesus, that he came and he did those things for me. Be thankful for the gospel. Well, then Paul's going to go on. He's going to say this. I am reminded of your sincere faith, A faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now I am sure dwells in you as well. So Paul brings up his mother and his grandmother and says, hey, I'm reminded of your sincere faith, the faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now I'm sure dwells in you as well. The second thing I want us to see is this, is that we have an impact for the gospel. Listen, when we choose to live our life and we continue just to pursue after Jesus, we will have an incredible impact on those around us. Just like Paul says, hey, I'm reminded of your mother and your grandmother who the faith started with them. And they shared that with you, and now it's having an impact in the church of Ephesus and in the kingdom, isn't it? Like one grandmother's faith, and we're still reading about it. Come on, church. You don't know, as you live your life for the gospel, to point people to Jesus, you don't know the impact, but God does. And when we live our life for the gospel, we will have an impact for the gospel. Listen, God uses us to point people to Jesus. He uses you. He doesn't just use me and Dakota and Ricky. He uses you. You are in places that I am not. You know people that I do not. Dakota would say that's probably not true. But listen, you know people that I do not know. You are around people that I am not. Have an impact for the gospel. Live your life in such a way that they see Jesus. What Paul's encouragement to Timothy is like, hey, I'm reminded of the faith that your grandmother had and your mother had, but is also in you. Listen, parents, grandparents, your goal in life with your children and grandchildren is not to make sure that they're great at whatever sport they're great at. Look, I love sports, and they've taught me a lot of lessons, right? I coach Briggs' football team, and we have a blast doing it. But listen, that's not the goal. That's not the goal. Listen, parents, grandparents, your goal in life is not to give them everything they want. It's just not, grandparents. Jimmy, here it is. Listen, it's not to give them everything they want. That's not the goal. The goal in everything we do is to point them to Jesus. My first mission in all of life is not to be your pastor. You hear me? My first mission in life is first to lead my family. If I fail there, then I might as well not get up here on Sunday mornings. My first mission in life is my family, to lead my family, to point my family to Jesus in all things. In how I act, in how I talk, everything. And so Paul tells Timothy, hey, look at your grandmother. Look at your mother. Look at the faith they had. They have an impact for the gospel. Do that, Timothy. In the summer of 1996, I was sitting in the balcony of Hardin-Simmons University's Barron's Chapel. In row 2, seat 2. Like, oh, that's pretty specific, ready? It is. Chris Tomlin had just led worship at Super Summer Camp, and Louis Giglio came out and began to speak. And he said, some of you in this room, at the end of his talk, some of you in this room, the Lord is calling you to ministry. And all he wants from you is yes. And I felt like the weight of that entire auditorium was on my back. And I fought, and I fought, and I finally said, okay, God, yes. And the weight of that chapel lifted. And I knew in that moment that I was called to vocational ministry. And I was scared to death. And I remember going back to the dorm that night in Anderson Hall and just asking God, like, God, I don't know what this means. I said yes, but I have no idea what this means. I was scared to death. I was going into my freshman year of high school, and I was scared to death. And I remember distinctly the Lord saying, watch your grandmother. Watch your grandmother. My grandmother was a Southern Baptist pastor's wife. My grandfather died before, and so she was what I had left. And I watched her over the next 4 years. I just watched her. I interviewed her a couple of times for school assignments, and I just watched her. And what I learned, above all things, keep Jesus first and love people. That's how she lived her life. Listen, we have an impact for the gospel by how we live our lives at home first, and then our workplace, and everywhere else we go. So Paul tells Timothy this, and then listen, last thing he tells him is that we are to practice sharing the gospel. He says, for this reason, I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God, which is in you through the laying on of my hands. For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. Paul says, hey, for this reason, Timmy, for these reasons, because of the thankfulness to the gospel, because of Eunice and Lois and your grandmother and the faith that you have, for these reasons, I'm telling you, fan into flame the gift that is in you. Listen, we talked about Timothy being a little shy. How many of you are shy? How many of you are introverted? Let's go there, okay? How many of you struggle like, I don't know if I could talk to anybody? Yeah, it's okay. Lee. Like, we all have those things, right? I don't have that. In case you were curious, I don't think it was a secret. I don't have a problem talking to people. But listen. What Paul tells Timothy is this. Fan into flame the gift of God, which is in you through the laying on of my hands. What does that mean? It means this Greek phrase here, fan into flame, is the rekindling. Okay? How many of you ever let a fire die and it got down to just hot coals? But what can you do before it completely goes out? You blow on it. You give it oxygen, and then put more dry wood on it. And all of a sudden, because you've given it fuel and you've been intentional with it, what happens? Back up. It's intentionality. That's what Paul's telling him. It's like we got to practice sharing the gospel. We got to be intentional about it. Be intentional with it. Intentional to fan the flame that is in you. Listen, you will not share the gospel regularly if you're not practicing sharing the gospel regularly. You hear that? We got to do it on a regular basis. And guess what happens when we do it on a regular basis? We get better at it, don't we? Yep. We get better at it. He says this. I love what he does here because this is what Paul does with Timothy. He's like, hey, fan in the flame. Be intentional with the gift that's been given to you. Verse 7, for God gave us a spirit not of fear, but what? But of power and love and self-control. What has he done? He says, hey, Timothy, God's given you a spirit of, not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. That we've been given all the things we need to do what? Share our faith. We say this often, but if you have come into a relationship with Jesus, you have enough information to share how to come into a relationship with Jesus with somebody else. Right? God's not giving you a spirit of fear, but he's giving you a spirit of power. Of, I got this. Not because it's me, but because of what? It's Christ in me. He's given me this spirit of power, this spirit of boldness, this spirit of, hey, can I share with you about Jesus? He's given that to you. But yet we sit in fear. And the enemy does what? Keeps us right here and says we're okay. You don't need to do that. It's okay. They're just going to laugh at you if you do. We tend to sit in this spirit of fear when he's given us a spirit of power. But he's also given us a spirit of love. A spirit of love. What does that mean? It means that we look at people around us that don't know Jesus and we have a heart for them. And we want to love them in a way that says, hey, I want you to know Jesus. I desperately want you to know and follow after Jesus. That's what I want for you. But instead, what do? Over here in the fear category, what do? Say, they don't look like me. They don't act like me. They don't talk like me. I don't have anything in common with them. Like, have you seen them? Right? It's an excuse we make. They're not going to listen anyway. Well, what do? We come up with all these reasons as to why when Paul tells Timothy, been given not a spirit of fear, but of love, of power, of love, but also does what? Self-control. Self-control. Been given a spirit of self-control. Well, what does that mean in regards to the gospel? That means this, is that you don't have to be awkward about it, right? You don't have to be weird about it. But also it means this, is that when we've been given the spirit of self-control, it means that we, listen, this goes back to our whole life, doesn't it? Is that when we're living our lives in self-control and in love and in power, what happens to those around us? They look at us and go, what do you have? Right? Why when this happens to you at work, you don't blow up and lose your mind? Because I do that. Why don't you do that? You see that? You see, so now because we've been given that gift and we exercise that gift in us, now somebody sees it and goes, why is that different in you than it is in me? You see that, church? The kids see it. I'm going to start sending y'all to children's church and they can come in here. Right? Like that's what the gospel does in you and in me. When it comes to leading our neighbors to know and be changed by Jesus, ultimately what has to happen is the gospel transforms us from the inside out. And as it does those things, as we're thankful for the gospel, watch this, Saved it for the end. As we're thankful for the gospel, we have an impact for the gospel. And as we're thankful for the gospel, what happens? We begin to share the gospel. It's all stemmed from our thankfulness.